Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're going to be taking a look at habits with all the stuff you send over about James Clear's Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
It seems like it's all about these tiny changes you make that lead to really big results over time. Is that kind of the core idea?
Yeah. That's the core idea. And he kind of challenges this idea of these overnight transformations and says that focusing on these really small 1% improvements are the real key to lasting change.
Okay, so these baby steps that everybody
Uh-huh.
talks about, or is it more nuanced than that?
Yeah, it's a little bit, I guess, more nuanced than just baby steps. Think of it like this. If a ship is setting sail and adjusts its course by just 1 degree, it might not seem like a big deal at first.
Right.
But over a long journey, that tiny change can make a huge difference in where the ship ends up.
I like that. That really kind of puts it into perspective
Yeah.
because, yeah, you think 1 degree, it's not a big deal, but over time,
Right.
that really adds up.
Exactly.
But how does that actually play out, like, in real life? Do you have any good examples?
Well, you've probably heard of the British cycling team,
Yeah.
how they just completely turned things around.
Yeah, they were, like, dominant for a while.
Yeah, yeah. They went from being relatively unknown to like absolutely crushing the Olympics.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought it was because they got some amazing new coach or like some intense training regimen.
Right, right.
But the real secret to their success was this idea of marginal gains.
Okay.
They basically focused on getting 1% better in every single area of their training and performance.
Wow.
So like they tweaked the bike seat design to make it more aerodynamic.
Wow.
They tested different massage gels to see which one would help muscles recover faster.
Oh.
They even like made sure that every athlete was getting optimal sleep.
Wow, so it was all these little tiny things that they were like, oh, we can tweak this, we can tweak that.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
And it worked.
Yeah, it obviously worked. I mean, they were crushing it. So I could already see how that can kind of apply to other areas of life.
Absolutely. Think about like your own goals. Maybe you want to write a book or launch a business or learn a new language. It
Yeah.
can feel super overwhelming to think about the whole process all at once.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But if you break it down into these small 1% improvements, it becomes a lot more manageable.
Yeah, that's a good point. This reminds me of something else that Clear talks about, focusing on the system rather than the goals themselves. And I think his own story is a testament to that, especially after that injury he had playing baseball in high school.
Yeah, that was huge for him.
Yeah.
Instead of defining himself by his injury, he used it as an opportunity to really develop systems and habits
Right.
that would help him succeed. He realized that focusing on consistent progress, even when it felt insignificant, was really the key to achieving his goals.
So he kind of took that marginal gains approach and applied it to his own life.
Exactly.
Really interesting. It really emphasizes how powerful these small, consistent actions can be over time.
Yeah, and that's a big takeaway for anyone listening. So often we want to make these big dramatic changes.
Yeah, I want the quick fix.
But real progress comes from building a system that supports small, consistent improvements. It's like he says habits are the compound interest of self-improvement.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this all fits together. We've got these tiny changes, the power of consistency in building the right systems. But where do we actually begin? How do we actually take all this information and turn it into action?
That's where his 4 laws of behavior change come in. It gives us a practical framework for understanding how habits work and how we can actually change them.
Okay, and these 4 laws, I've heard a little bit about them. Is it making it obvious, making it attractive, easy, and satisfying?
You got it.
Okay.
And they apply to building good habits and breaking bad ones. But before we jump into each law, it's helpful to understand that habits aren't random. They actually follow a very predictable pattern.
Okay.
It's called the habit loop.
Okay, tell me more about this habit loop, because it sounds important if we're trying to make changes.
Yeah, so every habit that you have, whether it's brushing your teeth or scrolling through social media or biting your nails, it follows this 4-stage cycle. Cue, craving, response, and reward.
Okay.
And the cue is the trigger that initiates the habit.
So, for example, if, like, the cue is feeling stressed, the craving might be to relieve that stress, and then the response is like, I don't know, eating a bag of chips. And then the reward is that temporary feeling of comfort.
Yes, exactly. So understanding this loop is the first step, and then we can use the 4 laws to kind of hack this habit loop and make it work for us, not against us.
Okay, this is getting good. So let's break down these 4 laws and see how we can apply them to actually make some positive changes in our lives.
So the first law is all about making the cue obvious. We need to increase our awareness of the triggers that initiate our habits. Clear gives this great example of Dutch households that used to have their electrical meters placed in the center of their homes.
In the middle of the living room or something.
Yeah.
Why would they do that?
Because it made their energy consumption very, very visible. People couldn't ignore how much electricity they were using.
Oh, okay.
And guess what? It led to a significant decrease in energy usage.
Wow, that's really smart. So they made it obvious, and people actually changed their behavior.
Yeah.
So how can we apply that to, like, say, if we want to exercise more?
Well, instead of like leaving your workout clothes buried at the bottom of your drawer,
Yeah.
you could put them out the night before so you see them first thing in the morning.
Okay.
Or put your running shoes right by the door. You know, it's about making those cues for the habits you want highly visible and impossible to ignore.
Got it. So if you want to make it stick, make it obvious. And what about for bad habits? Do you just, like, hide those?
Exactly. For those habits that we're trying to break, we want to make the cues invisible or at least less appealing.
Okay.
And this leads us to the second law, make it attractive.
Make it attractive.
Yeah.
I get that for good habits. But how do you make a bad habit less attractive?
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting. We have to really dive into like the psychology of temptation and really understand that our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Right.
And our bad habits are often associated with some kind of reward, even if it's fleeting.
So like that feeling of relief you get when you finally give in to that urge to scroll on social media, even though you know you should be working.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So to counteract that, we need to find ways to make good habits more appealing and bad habits less so. One strategy that Ketty talks about is reframing our associations.
Okay.
So instead of viewing exercise as a chore, we can focus on the positive feelings that it gives us, increased energy, a better mood. Or instead of dreading eating a healthy meal, we can savor the delicious flavors and think about how nourishing it is for our bodies.
So it's kind of like a mental shift.
Exactly. It's all about perspective. It's about finding ways to make those good habits seem more desirable and the bad habits less tempting. And another really fascinating aspect of this law is the power of our social environment. We are much more likely to adopt habits that are considered normal and desirable by the people around us.
Oh, so like if all your friends are runners, you're more likely to become a runner.
Exactly.
Okay.
Humans are social creatures, and we're constantly being influenced by the norms and behaviors of our groups. So if you want to build a new habit, surround yourself with people who already embody that habit.
That's a good point. I never really thought about it like that. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Ah.
Okay, so we've covered making it obvious and making it attractive. What's next?
So now we get to the third law, make it easy. This is where we try to reduce the friction that prevents us from actually sticking to our new habits.
Okay, so we've set ourselves up for success with those cues and those attractive incentives.
Yeah.
But there's still that hurdle of actually doing it.
Yeah.
Like I'm super motivated to work out,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes just like changing clothes and getting my stuff together,
Yeah.
it just feels like such a big effort.
That's a great point. You hit on something key there. Our brains are literally wired to conserve energy, and often even the smallest amount of effort can feel like a huge obstacle to us.
Right.
So that's why Clear really emphasizes the importance of reducing that friction as much as possible.
Give me all the tips.
Yeah.
Because that's me. Like if it's too much effort, I'm out.
So one of Clear's most practical strategies is called the 2-minute rule.
Okay.
And it's deceptively simple, but it's super effective.
Okay.
The idea is that you break down any new habit into something that can be done in 2 minutes or less.
So like instead of going to the gym for 30 minutes,
Yeah.
I'm just going to warm up for 2 minutes.
Exactly.
It almost feels too easy.
It does, but that's the whole point. By lowering the barrier to entry,
Okay.
you're more likely to get started, and then once you've overcome that initial inertia, you're much more likely to just keep going.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, because you're already there.
Yeah.
You're already warmed up. You might as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. I can see how that would work. But what about for those more complex habits that can't be done in 2 minutes?
Well, the 2-minute rule is more about establishing the habit loop than necessarily completing the entire task.
Right.
So, for example, if you want to write a book,
Yeah.
you don't have to write the whole book in 2 minutes, but maybe you commit to writing for 2 minutes every day.
So you're just trying to build that routine rather than like focus on the end goal.
Exactly.
Okay,
It's
cool.
almost like tricking your brain into getting started.
Right. That's a good way to put it.
So by making that initial action as small and as effortless as possible, you're essentially rewiring your brain to associate that habit with ease instead of resistance.
I like it. Okay, so we've made it obvious, we've made it attractive, and we've made it easy. What's the final piece of the puzzle?
All right, so the fourth law is make it satisfying. And this is where we really tap into the power of rewards, which is really crucial for kind of solidifying that habit loop.
Okay, so rewards make sense, but isn't that kind of counterintuitive? Like, we're trying to build these long-term habits, but rewards are very immediate.
Right. But you have to remember that our brains are wired for instant gratification. We're much more likely to repeat behaviors that trigger that feeling of pleasure or satisfaction, even if the ultimate benefit is way down the road.
Okay, yeah, it's like brushing your teeth. We're not motivated by the long-term goal of healthy teeth.
Yeah.
We just want that clean mouth feeling.
Exactly. It's that immediate satisfaction
Right.
that makes us want to do it again and again. So it's about finding ways to make the habit itself rewarding, even if the ultimate payoff is down the line.
Okay, I can see how that ties in. So we've got the 4 laws all working together
Yeah.
to create a really nice system.
Yeah.
But what about those bad habits? Like, how do you make those unsatisfying?
Yeah, you can. Just like we make good habits satisfying, you can actually make bad habits unsatisfying. And that often involves adding a bit of friction or discomfort to those unwanted behaviors.
So it's like the opposite of making it easy.
Yes, exactly. For bad habits, we actually want to make them more difficult, less appealing, and even associate them with some negative consequences.
Like that story about Victor Hugo locking away his clothes so that he could focus on writing.
Yeah.
That is
Pretty
a
extreme.
little extreme.
But it's a great example of what's called a commitment device,
Okay.
which is basically a choice that you make in the present to control your actions in the future.
Okay.
So by making it harder to do the bad habit, you're less likely to give in to temptation.
I like that. I mean, it's like putting the cookies
Yeah.
on the top shelf where you can't reach them.
Exactly.
Or putting those website
Yes.
blockers
Yeah.
that stop you from,
All those things.
from scrolling mindlessly.
Exactly. So it's about finding creative ways to increase the friction and make that bad habit less appealing. Another good strategy is to build in accountability.
Or accountability, like having a workout buddy
Yeah.
who's going to,
Call you out.
call you out if you don't go to the gym.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Having someone to hold you accountable can be a really powerful motivator because it introduces that social element. Right.
And it adds a layer of consequence for not following through with your commitment.
So you're not just letting yourself down, you're letting someone else down.
Exactly.
This is great. So we're basically flipping the script on those bad habits by making them less obvious, less attractive, more difficult, and less satisfying.
You got it.
It's like we're taking away their power.
Yeah, exactly. And by understanding these mechanics of how habits work, we can actually take control and kind of design our lives
Right.
in a way that actually supports our goals.
This is all super insightful. But one of the things that really stuck out to me in Claire's book was this idea that it's not just about building and breaking habits, but it's also about finding the right habits for us. And he talks about this concept called the Goldilocks rule.
Oh, the Goldilocks rule.
Yeah.
Yes. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
It basically suggests that we experience peak motivation when we're working on tasks that are just challenging enough,
Okay.
not too easy and not too hard, like Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Yeah.
Not too hot, not too cold.
Exactly. Just right. And Clear says that boredom can actually be a major obstacle to habit formation.
Okay.
Because if the habit's too easy, we lose interest. But if it's too hard, we just get discouraged. So we
Right.
have to find that sweet spot
Right in the middle.
where we're challenged but not overwhelmed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because if it's too easy,
Yeah.
it's not really stimulating. But if it's too hard, then you just like, forget it.
You give up.
I'm not even going to try.
Yeah, you're not growing.
Right.
Exactly. And that's the key, is finding that balance between the challenge and your skill level. It's like that old saying, if you're not growing, you're dying. So we need that continuous challenge to keep us motivated and engaged in the process of self-improvement.
This reminds me of another thing that he talks about, which is the role of identity in habit formation.
Yeah.
And he argues that lasting behavior change isn't just about what we do. It's about who we believe we are.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
The idea that it's not just about our goals or like changing our actions, it's about shifting our underlying beliefs about ourselves.
Right.
It's about aligning our habits with our desired identity.
So like instead of saying, I want to lose weight,
Yeah.
it's, I am a healthy person
Exactly.
who makes choices
Yes.
that support my well-being.
You're embodying that identity.
Yes. It's a totally different mindset.
It is, and it's a much more powerful and sustainable approach to change because you're not just forcing yourself to do something. You're becoming the kind of person who naturally does those things.
Okay, I'm with you on that one. I think that's super powerful.
Yeah.
But it also brings up the question of like, well, how do you change your identity?
That is the question.
That's a tough one.
That's a big one.
It seems like a really big task.
And that's where things get even more interesting, and we're going to pick that up in the next part of our deep dive.
So we've covered so much in this deep dive about atomic habits, tiny changes, systems, the 4 laws, even the Goldilocks rule.
Yeah.
And you were just talking about this idea of how identity plays a key role in shaping our habits.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to say, I like the idea, but it also seems a little intimidating.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this really deep part of ourselves.
It is.
How do you even start to change something like that?
It's definitely more nuanced,
Yeah.
but really powerful.
Right.
Because the idea is that your current actions are basically a reflection of your current identity.
Oh.
So if you see yourself as somebody who's disorganized or who procrastinates a lot,
Yeah.
then you're probably going to act in ways that confirm that belief.
Yeah. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, even if it's a bad one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the good news is that we can kind of reverse engineer this process.
Okay.
So instead of letting our current identity dictate our actions, we can consciously choose the identity that we want to embody
Okay.
and then let our actions shape our identity.
So it's like making those small changes
Mm-hmm.
and building those good habits that align with the person we want to be. So we're kind of proving it to ourselves
Yes.
through our actions
Yeah.
that we are that person.
Exactly. And as you accumulate more and more evidence of these new behaviors, your self-image actually starts to shift and you start to see yourself differently.
Okay.
And that's when lasting change happens.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you have any examples of how this works, like in the real world?
Yeah, so think about someone who wants to be a writer.
Okay.
If they only identify as someone who wants to write, they might kind of dabble in it here and there.
Right.
But if they start calling themselves a writer
Okay.
and actually make time for writing every single day, even if it's just for a few minutes, their identity starts to shift.
Well, so they're putting on that hat
Yeah,
and they're acting the part.
exactly.
And the more they act it,
The more they become it.
the more they become it.
Yeah,
I like it. And it works for anything.
it does.
It doesn't have to be writing. If you want to be a healthier person, act like a healthy person,
Exactly.
make those choices.
Make those choices. Surround yourself with other people who
Yeah.
embody those values.
Surround yourself with healthy people.
Exactly.
It's powerful stuff.
It is.
You're not stuck with your current habits.
You're not.
You can choose to be someone different
Yes.
and then just become that person through your actions.
That's the beauty of it. It gives you so much control.
Yeah.
It reminds you that you're not defined by your past or even your current circumstances. You can actually shape your future
Right.
through your daily choices and the identity that you choose to embody.
This is great. This has been a really cool deep dive.
Yeah.
We've covered so much in this book. Tiny changes systems,
Yeah.
the 4 laws, the Goldilocks rule,
Mm.
and now this really cool idea of identity.
Yeah, it's amazing how much practical wisdom is packed into this book.
It really is.
And the biggest takeaway for me is that change is possible for anyone. It's
Okay.
not about these grand gestures or these overnight transformations.
Yeah.
It's about the small, consistent actions, those atomic habits
Right.
that accumulate over time and create these extraordinary results.
So what do you say to the listeners out there? What's that one thing that they should take away from all of this?
I would say the challenge for you is to ask yourself, what identity do you want to embody? And then what small changes can you make today to start living in alignment with that vision? Remember, even the tiniest step in the right direction can create these ripple effects that literally transform your entire life.
I love that. And it goes back to that idea of the 1% changes.
Yeah,
It all ties
it
together.
all comes full circle.
So this has been another awesome deep dive. I'm glad we got to explore this one together.
Me too.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep believing in the power of these small changes to create a life